Season's greetings. More people have been caught with guns going through the TSA checkpoints at Tampa Bay Airport so far this year than last year. Tampa leads the state, 90 so far this year. Last year Orlando led the pack. Sarasota Bradenton 4, Clearwater 7, 4 in Punta Gorda. So what is going on here? Joining us for more is Mark Howell of the Transportation Security Administration and attorney Jeff Young, also known locally as the gun attorney. Gentlemen, thank you very much. So Mark, let me start with you. Why do you think the increase in the Tampa Bay area this year?
Well, I'll update you. Just over the weekend, we had one more, so we're up to 91 in Tampa now. Again, 4 here in Sarasota. But I think probably the thing that's leading to it or attributing the most is you have more people traveling than ever before, and you've got more people carrying firearms than ever before. So the simple equation is more guns plus more people at airports equals more guns at airports.
Does this make the TSA's job more difficult from the point of view that now more than ever we are concerned about terrorism and what happened at airports? We had that situation in Fort Lauderdale, and you know, it's complicated more by more guns being found.
Well, 99.9% of the people that bring these to the checkpoint say, oops, I forgot it was in my bag. So we know that they're not a threat, but it's taken away our focus from other things that we need to find on board aircraft. So we're looking for those explosives, those things that would be really catastrophic on board an aircraft. And when we have so many firearms, really, as we had mentioned before, is the wait times get longer. So as we're waiting for law enforcement response to come and remove it, it's going to make the line exponentially longer.
Now, Jeff, you are dealing with this right now. You have almost a spike in the number of clients who basically have been charged with bringing guns into the airports?
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem that's been going on for a while. It does seem to be that there have been some recent events that have led to people having issues like that. But I agree that I think the main issue is volume. I mean, we all know that statistically speaking, there are more firearms out there now. There are more people with concealed weapons permits this time of year, and just in general, people are traveling more. So you just end up doing the math, and it ends up being higher numbers.
What do you mean in terms of recent events or having the result of more firearms being found on people?
I think that's what I'm talking about, is just more firearms that are out there. When I talk about recent events, obviously over the last couple of years, we've seen a spike in firearms. We've seen a spike in concealed weapons permits and applications and permission. So I think security is on a heightened alert, probably recently, because we see kind of a little bit of spike in recent terrorist attacks. So I think everything just put together leads to just more things happening that shouldn't happen.
So it's not that travelers are saying consciously that we know that terrorism is dangerous, airports are a target, therefore I'm going in armed.
No, I'm not seeing that in the cases that I'm dealing with. It's not cases of people who are purposely trying to flaunt the law and carry a firearm with them because they're afraid of what could happen at the airport. I agree. I think 99.9% of the cases, at least that I've dealt with, are accidents. People who forget that they pack something or they put it in the wrong bag. Well, we've been talking, people use the same bag to go to the range, and then they just use that same bag to travel, but they forget to take the ammunition out of the bag, or they find loose bullets. So I think a lot of it is just people either in the haste of getting packed or trying to rush the airport aren't planning properly and are simply making unfortunate mistakes.
And really, folks from all walks of life.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of, I'm sure he could probably attest to that you're not finding, hardened criminals obviously carrying these firearms. You're finding your everyday citizens just not paying attention to what they're doing.
But make no mistake about it, the penalty for being caught with a weapon in carry-on luggage is really significant.
It can. TSA can issue a civil penalty for bringing a firearm to the checkpoint of up to $13,000. And that's on top or separate of whatever law enforcement is going to decide to do. They're going to take the firearm from the point where we discover it at the checkpoint and go through the process to make sure, one, it's legal and that they have a carry permit. From that point is where we assess a civil penalty later. And that's a very costly mistake. Could be with the court costs added onto it, could be very, very expensive.
Okay, we are just getting warmed up. We'll have much more on guns at airports right after we check the first alert weather. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about the increase in firearms found on travelers going through TSA checkpoints in the Tampa Bay area. And joining us for more is Mark Howell of the Transportation Security Administration and attorney Jeff Young, known locally as the gun attorney. And Jeff, we were talking about before, I did this story a couple of years ago, and there were plenty of people in the Tampa Bay area who were charged, including pastors, little old ladies, barbers, and so forth. So this could happen. But in your experience, have your clients gotten into significant trouble for being charged with this?
Thankfully, not usually, no. Number one, because I have a really good attorney. But basically, as he indicated, it's generally obvious that it's somebody who's making a mistake. It's not somebody who's trying to scare people at the airport or trying to flaunt the law. It's legitimately somebody who's making a mistake. So if you have somebody who's a pastor or whatever who has no criminal history, has a perfectly legitimate concealed carry permit, and it's clear from the facts at the scene that it was a mistake, most prosecutors and most judges and law enforcement understand that, so they end up giving them a lot of leniency as it comes to the court proceedings.
Let me ask you this, because within the last year, State Senator Greg Steube tried to get a law through the legislature that would allow people to bring firearms into airport terminals, I believe, up to the TSA checkpoint. That probably would have made this a lot more complicated, don't you think?
Well, I don't necessarily think so, because all the security happens at the checkpoint. That's where people are getting caught when they're just putting their range bag that they forgot to unload into the conveyor belt, and it goes through and it buzzes off and they say, hey, you have a firearm. That's kind of where it breaks down. If you're talking about having firearms up until that point, just in the general terminal area where the restaurants are or whatever, it really shouldn't cause any sort of confusion, because the hope is that the people, if they're planning on getting on a plane and traveling somewhere, they would not be concealed carrying it, because it has to be checked into their terminal bag. So what I recommend is what I always recommend when it comes to firearm is people, if you're going to own a firearm and have a concealed carry permit, you got to exercise it responsibly, follow the laws, read the TSA websites before you go to the airport, and you won't have any of these problems.
Mark, is part of the problem here that people are flying into our area from different states with different laws, sometimes from different countries also with different laws?
I don't think that's much of the problem. The bigger problem is what he just mentioned. It's just simple forgetfulness, or just not paying attention to what they have with them in their bags, which is the case with most of our other prohibited items, as simple as oversized liquids or the knives and box cutters that we had talked about earlier. So I think that's the bigger problem, is just the forgetfulness. Rules are generally the same. You can't fly with a firearm in Canada or Mexico or just about anywhere else. So that's a pretty easy rule to remember, is don't bring a gun.
Now we're focusing on guns tonight, but the fact of the matter is TSA also finds a lot of other things that are also dangerous, like knives. I saw on the TSA website today swords. I remember doing a story, and martial arts weapons and so forth. Are those numbers also similarly up?
Yeah, they are. When you have the increase in volume that we're seeing, then you're going to see more prohibited items. And when we get into the holidays as well, there's an uptick because you have a lot more inexperienced travelers, those that don't know the rules on the liquids, that may not know what's allowed in your carry-on versus what's allowed in your check bag. So we do see a tick up toward the Thanksgiving, Christmas holidays as well.
Let me ask you this question. This is also a tough question, considering that the numbers are up because of the increase in volume. But no system is absolutely perfect in terms of finding all weapons, whether they are a knife or a sword or brass knuckles or a gun. So does this increase the chances that firearms could be slipping through bags and through the TSA checkpoint?
I won't say that it doesn't, but we are constantly doing retraining with our folks. They have to certify twice a year. They need to continuously train, and that's what happens when we have new folks come in too. We also have implemented kind of a basic training for TSA employees, where they go to a 2-week course and get a core kind of knowledge of what they're going to be looking for on screens. And then from there we reinforce it by doing constant training with them. So yeah, there is the potential that with the additional volume that there will be more things, but we're going to continue to find new technology that will help us better kind of do that in the checkpoint, but also keep continually doing the training. And when mistakes are made, we go back and do corrective action with those employees.
Jeff, as we discussed, there is prosecutorial discretion here in terms of how these cases are handled, but does that change from judge to judge, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, in terms of some judges want to take more enforcement action against somebody, and in other places maybe not so much?
Of course, and you find that with any crime. It depends on what county you're in, whether it's a large city versus a rural, and again, that counts with any crimes. But with firearms, yes, it does depend on the local law enforcement. Some law enforcement will just tell you to, hey, go back out to your car, put it in your glove compartment, come back in, go through, and have a merry day. Some of them will just confiscate them and give you a notice to appear, a ticket to come back to court when you get back from your trip. Others will actually handcuff you and perp walk you down the terminal in front of everybody and make you go to court and fight it in front of a judge and everything else. So they do have a wide range of discretion, just like any other crime that you get across the state.
And Mark, we're talking about that there's been an uptick in Florida in terms of year to year. But, you know, I'll tell you what, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back for final thoughts in a moment. And our guest joining us right now for final thoughts. Mark, for years, TSA, as I mentioned earlier, has been putting this out only almost on a weekly basis on the TSA website. It's almost like stupid things that we have found in people's luggage. What kind of reaction do you get to that? And is it kind of amazing that despite everything that we know these days, that there's so, you know, people inadvertently mostly are trying to get this stuff on aircraft?
I think that well, our Instagram was rated number 4 by Rolling Stone just because we post some of the strange things that people bring to the checkpoints. So I think there's some genuine interest in people seeing some of the crazy things that people bring to the checkpoint. But we like it as an educational tool because maybe if we touch two or three people through that medium, they'll know they're not allowed to bring those items. So for us, it's educational. They try to make it a little bit fun as well. But yeah, it's one of those things where we see something new every day, from cane swords to chainsaws, gas cans. I mean, it's weed whackers. It's something new every day.
Jeff, you know, we say that most of the time that people are doing this inadvertently, but are we doing a bad job in terms of educating the public who has concealed carry permits or gun permits what to do when they travel?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily related to firearms, as he just said. I mean, somebody's trying to bring a weed eater onto an airplane through their carry-on. That doesn't have anything to do with a firearm. That's just somebody who's not paying attention. So people should be educated about it. If you're going to carry a firearm and you're going to get a permit, you need to pay attention and follow the rules. I go to court every day, and there have been times when I've gotten out of my car and started walking to the courthouse and went, oops, I still have something I can't bring into the courthouse, so I'll turn around and have to go back and put it in my car. It is something you have to be constantly vigilant about, and so I advise people to pay attention.
Right, but the issue is that we live in such a frantic society at this point where there's more and more packed in our day. People make mistakes, and when you're dealing with a firearm going into an area that you can't have them, that's how mistakes happen.
Right, but they are mistakes. They get caught. People pay the penalty, and hopefully they never do it again. I mean, there are people who are accidentally forgetting to leave these firearms behind, but none of those situations that I'm aware of had led to any accidental discharges or any kind of massive problem happening at the airport. People need to learn and use it as an educational tool and stop doing it.
Mark, is the TSA considering anything else in terms of whether it's education or enforcement to try to bring these numbers down as more and more people go back into the, you know, to the friendly sky, so to speak?
I think the big thing we try to get across to people is we don't want to infringe on your right to take a firearm with you when you travel. You could do it as long as it's packed safely and it's put in the underside of the aircraft. For obvious reasons, we don't want it in the cabin. So we have everything outlined on the TSA website. We strongly urge that you go, if you're traveling for the first time with a firearm, to go there and see how to pack it. There's even a video that will take you through it step by step. So if you want to take your gun, please do. Just make sure you do it safely and you check it and declare it to the airline.
And when we talk about that, it can happen to all people. We found stories on you know, just recently, a wide receiver for the Buccaneers got caught with a firearm going through the airport. Another linebacker for the Eagles, a country music artist. You hear about this from time to time. So it is everyone who are making this mistake sometimes.
Sure. Musicians, like you said, musicians, politicians, sports stars. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're a gun owner, you need to know the rules and you need to be responsible and make sure that that you do the 5-minute check of your personal items before you come to the airport. That's our big ask. Know what you have in your bag. Make sure you don't have the guns, the other things that are prohibited, and it's going to keep you out of trouble and make the lines move faster.
Now, we mentioned earlier that Florida considered a law allowing firearms in airport terminals up until the TSA checkpoint, but in other states, I believe you mentioned Georgia, it is legal. Is there a difference in terms of the numbers there?
Well, Georgia is leading the nation in the terms of the number of firearms found at the checkpoint. They're at 236 so far this year. Last year was the total. They had the record for most in a year was 198.
Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of it is volume, but it is a very gun-friendly state. You have a lot of gun owners in Georgia, Florida, and Texas, which are coincidentally our 3 states that we have the most firearms found at checkpoints.
And Jeff, final thought in terms of what you would tell your clients out there in terms of the next time they trial, especially if they have been caught previously and cited.
Yeah, I think if you're a repeater offender, you're gonna run into problems. You're not gonna get any of that leniency that we talked about before. Everybody's probably gonna be entitled to some sort of a mulligan from the government if you do make this mistake. But I just need to emphasize that yes, carrying a firearm is an immense responsibility, and you need to take that seriously. You need to read the rules, pay attention to what you bring. If you do get in trouble, cooperate, provide them the documentation that you need, and then if you need a lawyer afterwards, they can take care of it.
And call you.
Always call me.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. And for the latest on local breaking news, don't forget to download the updated version of our app. If your current app doesn't work, it's because it's expired. Just go to the App Store and re-download it by searching for WWSB or My Suncoast. We want to thank both our guests for being here tonight. Mark Howell is with the Transportation Security Administration, and attorney Jeff Young is known locally as the gun attorney. When we